What up, y'all? My time in front of you is short, yet my task is of grand import. I'm tasked with convincing you that an idea you undoubtedly hold as a hard truth is no more real than Trump's defense of why he held on to top secret documents or his lies about the 2020 election. And since no one seems ready to let progressives know, I'm appointing myself the asshole responsible for telling y'all the truth. And that truth is, we didn't avert a red wave in 2022 because of Democratic candidates on the ballot. We didn't escape the red wave because of consultants from Washington, D.C. I didn't win my election last year because of TV ads or postcards, and neither did any other candidate, regardless of what they tell you. I and we escaped the red wave because of hard damn work from grassroots organizations and so many committed organizations. And so many committed organizers around this country. And a lot of you are in this room right now. And here's another truth that we must hold self-evident, as painful as it may be to hear. Some of the stuff you hear, correction, some of the shit you about to hear in some of these panels and some of these sessions will not be true. And I'm not being coy, nor am I trying to rehash or relive the bullshit of old tactics that have not got us free. And excludes people that look like me. If we continue to sell short our missions and sacrifice our lived experience for the sake of polls and focus groups, all while discounting the importance of our community connections and relationships with key demographics, then we will never move to the point where we value research methodology that demands researchers to work side by side with stakeholders in marginalized communities. It is only through this work that we can change and also understand social issues in a way that demands and bring about social change. Right now, we're sitting our asses in a city that was founded by a black man. I said Chicago was founded by a black man. That's a fact. In the 1700s. So we would be committing blasphemy if we were to pretend that doing big shit was not our task. So if I can remix the words of a great poet, Aubrey Graham, I would say, what a time to be alive. This work is big, but against depression and you and yours, I'll take me and mine. I am Mundell Robinson, the founder and principal of Black Male Voter Project and the mayor of Enfield, North Carolina. And in closing, and by the power vested in me by nobody, I would like to welcome you to Chicago, Illinois, a black-founded city that is once again, and maybe for the first time, under real black progressive leadership. And I'll leave you with the big question. Let me leave you with the big question. Is it oppression and you and yours, or are you fighting with equity with me and mine? Let's go, Netroots.
Netroots family, please give a warm welcome to Maurice Mitchell, National Director of the Working Families Party.
Greetings, family. Wait, this is a time to celebrate, and I know you all could do better than that. I said, greetings, family. I'm Maurice Mitchell, National Director of the Working Families Party, and it is such a pleasure to be in community with you all in Chicago, where the politically unlikely becomes the home of the politically probable, the politically possible, and the politically inevitable. But I'll get to that in a minute. This is like a homecoming for me. 5 years ago, in August, Netroots was in New Orleans. I had just taken the helm as National Director of the Working Families Party, The Working Families Party just had helped to elect a progressive mayor to that city, and the Netroots organizers were one of the first to reach out to ask me to speak. It was day 2 on the job for me. I got on stage and talked about building a multiracial, multi-generational political movement that demanded we discard the false choice between racial justice and economic justice. And I had, yes, you could clap for that. And I had no idea if this project would be successful, but as a lifelong organizer, I had a little faith that we could do big things together, and you all responded to the call. So when I say greetings, family, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And in the past 5 years, you all helped the Working Families Party and progressives across the country elect an army of people-powered candidates up and down the ballot. You all did that. Candidates like Kim Foxx, who as Cook County State's Attorney knew that our communities needed more than just prisons and punishment, and that our wealth or lack thereof shouldn't determine whether you go free or sit in a cell while awaiting trial. Candidates like State Senator Robert Peters, who I got the privilege of hearing, yep, give it up. And I got the privilege of hearing Robert at this month's People's Action Gathering in DC, and you'll hear from him tonight. State Senator Peters knows that we must take our progressive agenda to the biggest of cities and the smallest of rural towns to build a durable progressive majority. Candidates who know that our children deserve to learn in modern buildings that have AC in the summer, heat in the winter, libraries stocked with books, staffed with nurses and counselors, and not patrolled by police and resource officers. The last 5 years have also been cause for celebration right here in Chicago, preceded by years of organizing, specifically by the visionaries and thousands of workers and members, for example, of the Chicago Teachers Union, led by Stacey Davis Gates, who has been the strategist and architect of this progressive renaissance in Chicago. Our partners at United Working Families, who have built on that legacy under the esteemed leadership of former Executive Director Emma Tai, who you'll hear from later, who've elected progressives up and down the ticket. Candidates like Delia Ramirez, a working families champion, an organizer who was elected to the State House in 2018 and made history becoming the first Latina elected to Congress from the Midwest in 2022. You'll hear from another working families champion, former teacher and union organizer by the name of Brandon Johnson, who in the same 5-year span was elected to the Board of Commissioners in Cook County and was sworn in as this city's 57th mayor 2 months ago. Family, what a difference 5 years makes, right? But family, as satisfying and necessary it is to celebrate our victories, and we must learn to celebrate our victories. We can't rest on what we've won. MAGA Republicans and their corporate overlords are coming back stronger, better funded, and more dangerous. They're suppressing the vote, squashing dissent, targeting our families, and buying the Supreme Court. So you know what? We've got to be stronger, more organized, and maximize our resources. And I'm not just talking about increasing small dollar donations or building massive followers on social media. This is about remembering our why and remembering our greatest resource, our greatest capital. And those are our relational resources, our relational capital, our people and relationships. So right now, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to look down on the ground, look up at the ceiling, do whatever it does for you to be able to concentrate. Just do that for a second. And I want you to think about the person or the people that you're fighting for. Okay, I need you to do one thing for me. I need you to turn to your neighbor, turn to the left, turn to the right, turn behind you, in front of you, and I want you for a moment to tell them who you're fighting for and why. Go and tell them. Who are you fighting for and why? So I'm going to probably need for you to continue that conversation after our program. Thank you. Now, thank you. In the days and weeks after this convention, I want you all to remember just a little bit about what you heard and continue that conversation after the program. But listen to your comrades. And the fact that that conversation, once you start it, is hard to stop, tells you about the source of our power. When you hit the doors, when you phone bank, when you write that press release, or when you have any conversation, remember who you're fighting for. Remember who they're fighting for. The stakes couldn't be greater. And this is about more than just winning another election or flipping seats from red to blue. This is about preventing evil from happening to our loved ones and creating the conditions that allow people dearest to us to thrive. Because make no mistake about it, there will be change. The direction of that change, though, is up to us. We have three convening visions, three directions this country and our world can take in this juncture in history. We have the lie of neoliberalism, which says we keep on nibbling around the edges while never delivering substantive changes. A business as usual that opened the door for this neo-fascist authoritarian movement. That's one option, one direction. Those politics originating right here at the Chicago School have failed us. And it's such an obvious failure that even our president is dunking on the corpse of Milton Friedman right now and trickle-down economics. And I want to give a shout out to go on, Dark Brandon, go on. Bidenomics, we're here for it. Now, we have another direction, the neo-fascist version of freedom, which says you should be free to say whatever you want about marginalized people, free to whitewash history, free to target trans children and drag shows, and the freedom to own more guns than you could hold in two hands, free to extract wealth from the bottom to enrich the already wealthy, that police and prisons solely keep us safe, and the freedom to crush dissenting opinions. But I believe in our version of freedom. We have a positive freedom that says everyone, regardless of your zip code or where you come from, should have the right to do more than just make ends meet. You should have the freedom to thrive, to dream, to achieve, to love the person or persons you want to love, make your own decisions about expanding your family, educating your children, or the identities that give you meaning. I like our version of freedom. What do you think? And I don't know about y'all, but I don't want a Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump or anyone else trying to hop out of the GOP 2024 clown car pulling the levers of change. So we gotta fight like hell, right? This year and every year, up and down the ballot, we have to organize and we have to consolidate and we have to build the biggest tent that we could possibly build to defeat this rising fascist movement, a tent that could hold the Cheneys and the Chomskys of the world. That is our challenge. But it doesn't stop there. Remember that there are three tasks. And so as we defeat fascism and build a big tent, we must fully discredit and put in the dustbin of history the lie of neoliberalism by electing the Brandon Johnsons of the world, using the levers of government to transform the lives of working people regardless of their race, class, or political affiliation. Because when we fight when we organize, and when we consolidate that base, we win. Say it with me. When we fight, with your hands in the air. When we fight, with your hands in the air. When we organize, when we consolidate, when we build, when we organize, when we vote. Thank you, Netroots.
Welcome to the stage, the Cook County Public Defender, Sharon Mitchell, Jr.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be the second most charismatic Mitchell you meet today. My name is Sharon Mitchell, and I'm proud to serve as the Cook County Public Defender. Give it up. For those of you that don't know, public defenders in Cook County represent the vast majority of people ensnared in the criminal legal system. And that, to me and to many, is incredibly sad. Why is that? It's not because we don't work hard. It's not that because we don't want the work. It's because it's a reflection of a terrible reality that the vast majority of those people ensnared in the criminal legal system are poor. You're only assigned a public defender when you cannot afford an attorney. And it's indicative of the bond, the incredibly strong bond that links poverty and participation in the legal system. And when you add race to the picture, it becomes even more sad. Now, it's very dark out there, but I'm willing to guess, I feel strongly about this, that there are more poor black men in Cook County Jail than there are people in this room. It's incredibly sad. But what makes me happy, what makes me optimistic, is that there's a serious, there is a organized, there is a diverse, there's a powerful coalition of folks committed to a host of goals, including but not limited to dismantling and detangling the link between poverty and incarceration. And I'm so proud to be a part of that movement. Listen, y'all, I was born, I was raised, I live in a beautiful corner of the world called the South Side of Chicago. Every day I get home and I think, I feel so bad for you Northsiders. I feel so bad for you Westsiders, even the folks from the East Side and the suburbs too. And if you meet me at Taste of Chicago in Pullman on Saturday, your first delicacy from the South Side is on me. But I'm not blind to the fact that my community that is so beautiful has issues. It has issues with harm, but it's not the only issue. It has issues with opportunity and transportation and clean water and clean air and police accountability. We do not have just one problem. But I'm proud to stand with people who realize that the solutions that we need are far more complicated to be solved by simple solutions. Bars of the jail variety, bars of the prison variety, bars that fit on our ankles, bars that are fixed to the necks of individuals that are just trying to make it back. Those bars will not solve the problems that we have all across this country. I hope that we realize that we will not continue to solve our problems through incarceration. I'm proud to stand with the people who decided that they've had enough. So I think I was asked here today because I was one of thousands of people who fought to end a policy that was the greatest manifestation of that tie to the legal system and poverty and incarceration, that is cash bond. See, in Illinois and all of the states that employ it, we run an auction system. Let me say it again, we run an auction system. We in America we should be familiar with auction systems. A system that puts a price tag on one's freedom. But there are leaders in this city, in this region, in this state that have fought to end that practice. Those leaders were organized. Let me say again, those leaders were organized by people like you. Those organizers and those leaders that were organized knew the same thing that the mothers and the grandmothers and the sisters and the girlfriends and the church ladies knew, the ones I talked to when I was an attorney at 26 in California. They knew that putting a price tag on one's freedom was awful. They knew that the decision to pay rent or pay for their loved one's freedom was a decision that they shouldn't have to make. They knew when we hired fancy fancy academics and fancy researchers to learn that we were pulling literally tens and millions of dollars out of communities, money that could be no better described than ransom. So formerly incarcerated people and faith leaders and organizers and lawyers and regular folks that were from Chicago and from Champaign and from Springfield and from Rockford, even Northsiders and Westsiders got together with Southsiders, of course, and organized, and they ended the practice of cash bond. The Coalition to End Money Bond and the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice, shout out to the People's Lobby, released court watching reports, field town halls, field the Capitol lobby days. They met in churches with 3 people. They met in churches with 300 people. They locked arms with elected officials at 26 in California and refused to leave. They found champions. They talked to opponents. They wrote legislation. They knocked on doors. They fought a multi-million-dollar misinformation campaign. They convinced the governor, they convinced the legislator, and they got the votes. And at the eve of it starting, of us ending cash bond, our opponents turned to the courts to delay implementation. It ain't right. It's a practice that we've seen across the entire country, running to the courts to stop progressive change. So now we are waiting on the Illinois Supreme Court to make a decision on whether cash bond, the end of cash bond, will move forward. We are confident that we will win, but no matter the decision, we will continue to organize. I only have a little bit of time left. I'm a public defender. I'm gonna have to put in a plug for public defenders. No reform that we earn on paper can get to people without representation. No reform we put on paper cannot get to actual people without representation. Left to its own devices, the system will too often push incarceration. We as public defenders fight that fight, and our effectiveness relies on the support we get. We are blessed to come from a county that understands that importance, but that is not the case across the country. Our history of mass incarceration and wrongful convictions and false confessions and permanent punishments and vengeful revenge does not have to be our future of mass incarceration and wrongful convictions and false confessions and permanent punishments and vengeful revenge. We have leaders, many of which we will hear from today, the Foxes and the Peters and the Johnsons of the world that have stood up to power and fought for change. And we as public defenders will continue to join that fight. For decades, the criminal laws have been written by police and prosecutors and leaders that feel only accountable to them. I ask those here in Chicago, here in Cook County, and across the country to support your public defenders, to include them in the fight for justice. We are not just a stepping stone. We are not just a pool to create progressive prosecutors. We ourselves can fight for change. We ourselves can join you and get the justice that we deserve. I'm so happy that y'all are here in my city. I'm so happy that y'all are here in my city. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for continuing to fight for our communities. And speaking of fighting, I have the pleasure of introducing two icons, two legends that have fought for change in our criminal legal system. I have the great honor of introducing Colette Payne and State's Attorney Kim Foxx to the stage. Thank you all so much.
Good evening, you all. Ooh, that was loud.
Hey.
Hey. So my name is Colette Payne, from Chicago, born and raised. I'm the director of the Reclamation Project with the Women's Justice Institute, where I work with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women to reclaim their lives. And I have the opportunity of having Miss Lovely State's Attorney Kim Foxx of Cook County, who manages the second largest prosecutor's office in the United States. She will be joining me to read my monologue.
My name is Kim Foxx. I am currently the Cook County State's Attorney for the next 15 months. And in 2016, I was elected as the first Black woman to represent this office and the first person from Cabrini Green to be the Cook County State's Attorney. And so it is my absolute pleasure and privilege to present Colette Payne's autobiographical monologue entitled, Poverty No More.
A menace to society is what I was called by the judge at the age of 14. Those words rang in my ear and stabbed my mother in her heart. Not my baby, she cried. Not my baby.
I was a bad kid in the eyes of the law. They labeled me, and I wore that jacket for many years. It was fitting considering where I came from. All the kids that were born into poverty in my community wore the jacket. Promiscuous, too ghetto, nappy hair, liar. Why so many jackets with labels? I am not what you call me.
I want my words to paint a picture so you understand. I want them to tell you a story of a 12-year-old Black girl living in a homeless shelter with my siblings and parents, riding the L train from the north side to the south side and back again, being in awe of the difference. Some people wearing nice clothes, lawn, gardens, clean streets, others surrounded by barbed wire, broken glass, broken buildings, and broken dreams.
I want my words to ask you the question, why are there no resources? Why isn't there any help in Black, brown, and indigenous communities? And why should anybody have to go to prison or jail to receive support? I want my words to help you understand what welfare, mental health, and justice systems look like in communities of color.
Growing up, both my parents worked hard to provide. They wanted the best for us. Catholic schools, dance and music lessons. But it came harder and harder to cover expenses. My father was a respected tap dancer and choreographer in Chicago. But he was old when he started his family, 62 when I was born, and 70 when my mother gave birth to the youngest. When you're a dancer, you rely on your body. So once his health started to decline, his business did too.
You see, because my dad made his living as an artist, the arts were an important gift, not only for expression, but independence and economic survival. So like I said, my parents spent money to make sure we had piano lessons and dance lessons. I was almost ashamed of that because other kids around me, they didn't have that. But what we didn't have was enough food. I would see people who received food stamps coming home with all these groceries, and I'm like, dang, they got a lot of food.
But my mother didn't want to accept government assistance to get what we needed because she felt that we would all be trapped. They might say she wasn't capable of caring for us, and then the child welfare system would have stepped in and taken us. She would always say to me, honey, we don't get on welfare. And tell me stories about how the aid worker said that her daddy couldn't come into the home once they accepted support. You see, my mother was traumatized as a child by public assistance because that is how she lost her father.
Before 1968, there was a rule that stated that you could only receive public assistance if there was, quote, no able-bodied man in the house. This rule in the welfare system forced men who had lost their job or without enough work to choose between abandoning their children or watching them struggle with hunger. Punitive systems of separation that broke down our families in exchange for basic support. But even though we didn't have the kind of food that other kids had, my family was rich. Rich in love because we had each other. And no matter what we were going through, me and my 5 siblings always found time to laugh and joke, even after we lost our home.
I'll never forget coming home from school and seeing all our things, clothes, pictures dumped into the street. My father standing in the middle of it all with our dog. I was 12 years old and I was walking home with my brother who was 11 and our 4 younger siblings. My brother and I were so ashamed that we snuck away, took the L tracks down before he saw us. But my younger siblings ran to meet my dad, surrounding him with their own fears, crying and questions as he stood there trying to figure out what to do. You could see the look of overwhelm and determination on his face, an older man, 74, trying to provide and find a way for his children.
After a few months trying to keep our sanity in a shelter, we were able to get a home in the projects. This is when I realized we were poor. Because once you're in the projects, poverty encompasses every aspect of your life. When I think about the projects and the structure of how they were built, Black and brown people compartmentalized, labeled as poor, labeled as lazy, labeled as not wanting to work, labeled as receiving assistance, labeled as living off the government, labels that took no accountability for the history of oppression of people of color that left us impoverished and squeezed into a concentrated camp on top of one another. My mother didn't want to go back to the projects, but we needed housing, and the system gave her no other choice.
My parents would be gone most of the time working, and my older sister was left to watch us. During that time, my sister was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and her behavior was really unpredictable. Out of nowhere, she would start hitting me, and out of nowhere, she would start hitting me, and it was really scary. But my mom didn't want to believe it. My sister needed mental health support and treatment, but my mother didn't want that kind of help. Another punitive system for the poor that might break up our family. No, those places are bad, my mom would say. We're not going to put your sister in an institution.
So with my sister unwell, I became the oldest child in many ways and stepped up to do what I could. I would dress up, put on my Sunday's best, and shoplift to provide for me and my siblings. My parents would be at work, and we were tired of eating government cheese and bread, so I would steal food, mainly meat, and then come home and cook.
Or if we needed shoes, we had shoes, hand-me-down stuff, thrift store stuff, you know, but as a child, you always want what other kids have. I would dress up and head to Favors. I don't know if you remember a Favors. It's a store just like Payless. And I'd be like, don't tell mom where you got them from. And of course, my mom used to question everything. And I say, oh, my boyfriend's family gave them to me or something like that.
When I finally got caught at age 14, I stood before the judge, and he called me a menace to society, the family shoplifter of meats and shoes, a menace to society.
Did the judge know what it was like to be hungry?
Did the judge know what it was like to grow up in poverty, a poverty I thought I would never overcome?
Did the judge know what it was like to be extracted from your home and dumped into the streets?
Would it ever be possible for the judge to admire the determination of a young black girl not to give up? The way she looks in the mirror, adjusts her best blouse, and recites to her reflection, "Poverty no more, poverty no more."
The judge did not recognize that there was no menace or malice in my heart at that age. Simply a love for my family and a desire to provide some of the basic things every kid wants.
At age 14, I was sent to the juvenile prison, and there were so many people from the projects caged there. I couldn't believe it. And they were in there for doing a lot more than shoplifting. They really upped my game. I learned how to commit bigger crimes. The justice system, instead of helping me and my family, wove me more into the crime scene and more into the streets.
And by the time I was a young adult, I had 18 felony convictions for forgery and theft. I was looked at in my community as a role model of survival, the coldest hustler from Trey 9. I took on that identity. The label was mine. I owned it. And then when I wasn't sure if I could keep up, heroin gave me a feeling I could steal or take anything. And before I knew it, I was addicted.
I could say to you that if the judge had only asked me at age 14 why I was shoplifting, that I would have told him my story. Maybe he would have recognized me as a strong and loving child, trying to do good by my family, my own 14-year-old Robin Hood from the hood.
But honestly, if the judge had asked, I would not have told him because he would have knew about our hunger, my sister's mental collapse. He might not just have taken me, but all my siblings into another system called the Department of Children and Family Services. Instead of losing all of us, my mother just had to cry for one child, and I was the only one sent away.
Why? Why so many systems? And why are they so punitive? Who created them? And why do they separate us? Women and men with no legal economic support or opportunities are surrounded in poverty and forced to go into the underground market to survive. Whatever that underground market looks like, sometimes it's selling drugs, sometimes it's selling your body.
But you like to say the story is about crime or drug addiction when the story is about poverty. And the story of poverty in Black, brown, and indigenous communities is directly related to the history of slavery, genocide, black codes, Jim Crow, and all the redlining laws of the government that pushes us into the projects instead of homes in the suburbs. The story is about you, America, not me.
But you pretend not to see the violence that this American history has caused Black, brown, and indigenous Americans. You pretend not to see the violence that your punitive systems cause. You, instead of listening only to my personal story as part of this monologue, let's look at the story of state violence caused by multiple systems that America creates. Violence under the watchful eye of the law.
Because when I speak up for my community and say we need safe housing for women and children, instead the system offers us parenting classes led by people who don't look like us, don't understand the true story, and who label us with their judgments.
When I say we need mental health and drug addiction support, the state representative says, unfortunately, we don't have enough treatment facilities for your community, so folks will have to go to prison and get treatment and to keep communities safe.
What? That's not what we need, not what I needed. Prison didn't make me safe. Jails and prisons should not be our mental health facilities or our treatment facilities. We need resources funneled in communities, not jails and prisons. I always say this, there would be no need for prison or jail at all if we had the things that we need mentally, physically, and emotionally, and that should be readily available in one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
And the consequences when someone doesn't comply with one of these systems is so messed up. I just think about how many times I relapsed while struggling with heroin addiction. And with every relapse, the consequence was jail, not healing.
What about harm reduction? The harm of your system causes more trauma that is passed on parent to child, generation after generation. And it is intensified as you send parents to jail and children lose the love that is their greatest riches.
My trajectory in life could have been different if only you, America, had taken a closer look. If only you had seen me. But I see you, America. I see the pain that you will have and will cause if you don't look at racism, sexism, classism, and all the other isms that are woven into the systems that you create. Systems you say are for the good of justice, the good of mental health, the good of public assistance, but are tainted by rules and directives that destroy the lives of my community. Please know, I was incarcerated before I went to prison, by the bounds of poverty and injustice, and the shackles have more rings than I can count. Once inside your systems, the rings extended and the permanent punishment is hell.
I wanted my words to tell you a story of the past hopes and dreams that this system destroyed because of the first arrest and incarceration at the age of 14. But know that through it all, not only did I survive, I now thrive. And I work to dismantle punitive systems, and my experience as a formerly incarcerated woman has made me who I am today. And I won't hold on to shame or guilt. Remember me for who I truly was at age 14, and I continue to be today. A leader that leads with love and encourages all Black and brown girls to share their truths and claim poverty no more. I didn't cry this time. I didn't cry this time. You gotta go this way.
This way?
Good afternoon, early evening, everyone.
Yes.
My name is Asia Black, and this is Big Samir, and we are a group called The Reminders. As a part of the Justice Project, you will hear leaders of criminal legal system, as well as formerly incarcerated prisoners, come together to read monologues that are the stories of our formerly incarcerated persons. What you just witnessed was an incredible, visible display of a power dynamic that we don't get to see very often. And I just would like you to give another round of applause to both Kim Fox and Colette Payne for what they did up here and demonstrated. As a part of the Justice Project, we feel that it's very important to incorporate art into the responses to the monologues. And the reason I say this, did anybody attend the street art, the art and the importance of art and activism panel today? One of our dear friends, Rod Stars from Rebel Diaz, said we need to stop treating art like it's a sprinkle or a garnish on top of the movement and start treating it like it's a necessary ingredient. And what that ingredient is energy. The energy to endure being oppressed in every direction of your desire to create permanent, lasting, positive change. When we show up as artists, we show up not only to entertain you, but to remind you that there are feelings and emotions related to these stories. when the sister Colette Payne comes up here, who is an incredible and dynamic change maker in the city of Chicago. This story of her incarceration will once be a footnote on the bottom of a storied legacy that she is creating right here in this city. Another thing I'd like to say is that the importance of music as a response to this is also to remind you that when we tell these stories, we're not looking for pity or sympathy. We're just reminding you that everyone deserves dignity and respect and support. So don't feel sorry for these people. Don't feel sorry for our monologuists. We always say, don't feel bad for people, want good for them, right? So if it's okay with you, Colette Payne has picked one of our songs that she feels like best demonstrates the energy of the monologue that she just shared with you with Kim Fox, and we would like to perform that for you now with your permission. Is that okay?
Yes.
We're ready.
Oh, Brian.
Also, we're glad to be in Chicago. We came all the way from Colorado.
Straight up, Chicago's our second home.
So if you are a person that has gone through what you've gone through and you have the endurance to continue, you could just march with us like this.
Hey.
Shoulders.
Or you could just bop your head wherever you at.
This is for your energy to keep you going. Here we go.
Oh, come on. Rock with me now. Everybody in a place to be. In a place to be. Yes. Hey. We're gonna take you on a journey like this.
I have walked 10,000 miles. I can walk 10,000 more.
Gotta keep walking.
I have walked 10,000 miles. I can walk 10,000.
Keep walking. Gotta keep walking.
We put the stars in the night sky, light as a guide. We peer through the darkness at these biggest divides. Beauty of the darkness, who took the moon as a bride.
Controlling the tide.
Emotions that we feeling inside. Who was holding you and holding you to show you the way. I never doubted for a moment. Golden spirits take the symbols
As an omen.
holding
To
tight.
the head of the creator. The time is now, never later. The time is now.
Never later.
The time is now.
Never later.
The time is now.
Never later. Never
The
later.
time is now.
Time is now. Never later.
The time is now.
Never later.
Now.
The time is now. Never later. Later.
Bare feet, hair covered, walking in the desert, not looking for a way home, thirsty for wisdom, wishing for sunshine instead of dark cloud. I contemplated things I never say out loud, made mistakes I can't escape or hide from, locked myself in prayer chambers for hours with no distraction. Mind balance through pain and transformation. No, I'm not a saint, I had to beg for repentance. Learn how to sit back and watch the world in silence, getting status, cause I speak what I practice.
From young vision blurry.
Living life in a hurry, recognize my impact, took control of my destiny. Took control of my destiny.
Ma lumière, voyager dans le temps
Et j'ai trouvé voyager. Et j'ai trouvé voyager dans les temps. Et j'ai trouvé ma lumière.
Voyager
dans les temps.
et j'ai trouvé
Ma lumière. Voyager.
et j'ai trouvé. I have walked 10,000 miles. I can walk 10,000.
Keep walking, gotta keep walking.
I have walked 10,000 miles. I can walk 10,000.
Keep walking, gotta keep walking.
Listen.
And I have walked 10,000 miles. And I can walk 10,000 more. And I have walked 10,000 miles. And I can walk 10,000 more.
And I
have walked 10,000
miles.
And I
walk
can walk 10,000 more. And you
have walked
10,000
miles.
And you
can walk
10,000
more.
And we
have walked
10,000 miles. And we can walk 10,000 more. And we have walked 10,000 miles. And we can walk 10,000 more.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Much love, much love.
They were amazing, right? Let's give it up one more time for the reminders. They brought that medicine. Okay. As part of Modus Theater's Just Us monologues, we always ask 2 questions of our guest co-readers. First, I would like to ask State's Attorney Kim Foxx, what most impacted you personally, simply as another woman, as you read my story?
We commented that we didn't cry when we did this. I've had the privilege of doing this before, but I can't promise you I'm not going to cry now. Colette's story is my story. The projects that she's talking about is Cabrini. I stole as a youngster. I was in and out of poverty. My family was on the margins, and so the line in there when you said if they could see what was in me. And so the both of us landed in the criminal justice system. And I could have just as easily been an inmate, and you could have just as easily been the state's attorney.
Thank you for that response. What most impacted me was having had having had the privilege to have you read my story. Who is that?
Break it up.
You know, I never thought in a million years that I would be sitting next to someone so powerful as you, and even others that I stood amongst. Like, I wouldn't have never thought that I would be here in this place. I thought I was going to die either from drugs or, I'm not gonna cry, or just die in jail. But what I do know is when we have support, like the support that you're giving me now, we become strong. And I want you all to know that we are stronger together. And it takes system stakeholders, all of us working together across multiple systems to get to a place that we want to see, a world that we want to see. I'm an organizer, an abolitionist, but I know we can't get to abolition unless we work together. And now one final question for State's Attorney Kim Foxx. How do you hold my monologue from a position of your leadership as the state's attorney for Cook County, Illinois?
I think I root my policies in the questions that you would ask the judge. Do I see you? Do I want to throw away people who have the potential to do great things like you've done for laws that don't recognize the complexity of the harms that got you to that place in the first place? And so it has been why, we raised the threshold for retail theft, so we weren't sending young people to prison who were doing crimes of survival. It's why we stopped prosecuting before marijuana was legalized, people for possessing small amounts, and when we legalized marijuana, vacating those convictions so people can get jobs and housing and be able to have a life. It's why we worked on eliminating cash bail with the advocates and Sharon Mitchell and those who have been doing this, because we recognized that those were oppressive systems that saw people caught up and trapped. So every policy decision that has made people really mad at Kim Foxx was rooted in Colette Payne's story, to make sure that Colette Payne could be the powerful voice in the world that she could be, because I recognize that America has a problem. And it's not Colette Payne, it's the systems that have been put in place to hold you back.
Thank you. Thank you for holding space for me and holding my story. I My story isn't unique, like you said. There's many Colette Paynes out there, and I appreciate everything that you do for our city.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Motus Theater, who is touring their Just Us project for that moving monologue and musical response. And now, please welcome Illinois State Senator Robert Peters.
Good evening. I'm Illinois State Senator Robert Peters from Illinois' 13th District. Before this role, I was a community organizer who worked to end cash bail. Now I'm an organizer in the Illinois General Assembly, where I was the lead sponsor on legislation that will end cash bail. No matter my title, I am an organizer, and I come from the movement. It is time this country understands what is happening right here in Illinois, right here in flyover country, right here in the middle of it all. It is in Illinois that we are seeing what progressive power and progressive movement can do. I've seen it firsthand. Just 8 years ago, I took my first arrest protesting Republican Governor Bruce Rauner's draconian attacks on working people. Just about 6 years ago, Cook County courts moved away from the most punitive cash bail practices. Just 2 years ago, the Black Caucus passed massive legislative packages in response to the Black Lives Matter movement and racial justice uprising, including the initial passage of the Pretrial Fairness Act, which will end cash bail. Just last year, when faced with right-wing backlash against progressive accomplishments we have made in this state, our Democratic Party leaders didn't commit the heinous mistakes of Dem leaders in New York. They stood firm with the progressive movement and defended our supermajorities. In fact, in Illinois, our Democratic governor crushed their opponent. Our Democratic Illinois House grew its supermajority. The Democratic Illinois Senate maintained its supermajority, not by running away, but leaning into ending cash bail. And this is thanks to movement. Look, I get it. We're in the middle of flyover country, and our country faces a dual threat. We face the threat of right-wingers who are embracing a particular American strain of fascism that violates every facet of public and private life. But we also face the threat of the nihilistic naysayer who tells us nothing can or will change. History doesn't remember the nihilistic naysayer. Who wants to be the one to tell enslaved people they won't ever be free from chattel slavery? Who wants to be the one to tell working people that the New Deal won't work? Who wants to be the one to tell Dr. King that you can't march in Selma because it is too dangerous? We must leave these nameless fools behind. And we have too many of them out there. They're keeping the door open for the worst elements of our politics. They're allowing the far-right troll to guard the bridge to our future. I want to talk about Dr. King. Actually, I want to talk about Coretta Scott King. After her husband was assassinated, murdered by the early iteration of right-wing extremists that we're seeing today, she went to Washington, D.C. and advocated for a jobs guarantee. She said that working people, especially working-class black people, was a right to a good job, to power. She especially noted this when it came to public safety. She spent years pushing for this. And instead, D.C. leaders passed the first iteration of racist law and order and tough on crime laws. 50 years later, it is clear that Coretta Scott King was right. None of these supposed tough on crime laws have truly made us safer. But the good news is, and I come bearing the good news. You're going to hear Brandon Johnson. I'm going to try to preach like the mayor. But the good news is, right here in Illinois, the naysayers, the right-wingers, the banal technocrats are losing. They went at our Cook County State's attorney multiple times, and they're still going. They've attacked our governor, legislator with tens of millions of dollars of fake newspapers predicting the end of days due to the end of cash bail. Snap, they tried to elect the mayor of the city of Chicago, but they lost. and they will lose. We're organizing movement throughout the state, committed to building power, lifting up working class communities, and we're tired of the bullshit. It is because of this that I have hope. Right here in Chicago and Illinois, we have models for what organizing and hope and struggle can bring. We elected a transformative mayor, who himself is now our chief organizer. We have city council members and state legislators that are being elected directly from movement organizations like United Working Families and the People's Lobby. We have a Cook County Democratic Party chair that awarded a Democratic Socialist committeeman as well as grassroots progressive organizations for the work that they did. We have a governor who has made it clear that he wants to be seen as the most progressive leader in this country and isn't scared of that. In Illinois, we have massively expanded reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, made collective bargaining a constitutionalized right, ended the death penalty, will end cash bail, and we aren't debating whether to provide undocumented immigrants health care. We are debating how much we must give to undocumented immigrants. We have passed transformative bill to combat climate change, along with billions in capital infrastructure projects. And here in Chicago, we have elected a mayor in Brandon Johnson who stood at picket lines, has already put grassroots movement leaders in significant positions leading community safety, immigrant rights, labor rights, education, and economic justice. A mayor who's made it clear that he is connected to the very deep and loving soul of this city. Look, my biological mom struggled with addiction, and the system put me up for adoption. And I was adopted by a lawyer who fought against police brutality and wrongful convictions. I was adopted by a social worker who herself struggled with addiction. We can build a world where people can get the treatment they deserve, where people don't have their civil rights violated, where safety is more than blue lights, but truly is comfort. Everyone deserves to have a safe roof over their head, a grocery store, good health care, to get from point A to point B. That is what we're fighting for, and that is the opportunity we have in Illinois and Chicago. We don't need to accept the far right's isolating approach to society, nor the nihilistic cynicism of the status quo. We have a lot of work in Illinois, but I'm proud of how far we've come. Netroots Nation, welcome to flyover country. Welcome to Illinois. Welcome to where progressives are hitting at the intersection of hope, change, and solidarity. Thank you. Now, I'm going to introduce someone who's played a leading role in making this happen. She's one of the smartest political minds I know. She's someone I can talk to about theory and organizing. She's a true strategist. Give it up to my friend, Emma Tai. Thank you.
Nation. My name is Emma Tai. I'm the former Executive Director of United Working Families and currently serving as a Senior Advisor to Mayor Brandon Johnson's transition organization. And doesn't it feel good to say that? Mayor Brandon Johnson! Doesn't it feel good to hear the mayor of the third biggest city in America say out loud that in the richest country in the history of the world, no one should be too poor to live? And doesn't it feel good to see our comrades like Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, who just 5 years ago was the lone no vote on a proposal to build a $95 million police academy, now become the most powerful alderman in city council? And to see Alderwoman Jeanette B. Taylor, who underwent a 30-day hunger strike to save Diet High School, now be the chairwoman of the Education Committee. And to see Congresswoman Delia Ramirez take DC by storm. For many of us, myself included, hope can feel like a rare thing. You see the wildfires, the smoke and the storms. You see the conspiracies and the racism, the lives lost, the schools closed, the children killed. But this moment here in Chicago is a hopeful one in which we are pushing the boundaries of what is possible. And I want to take a minute to talk about the coalition that made this moment of profound hope possible. Because we all know as organizers that we cannot do this alone, that up against the power of organized money, we need organized people. The coalition that powered a Cook County commissioner from polling at 3% in October to the 5th floor of City Hall in April. We are a field coalition. We, and this is not just UWF, but our sister organizations in labor and community, independent political organizations, and down ballot candidates, I see you, Oscar Sanchez, knocked over 500,000 doors in all 50 wards, sent over 1 million texts, and increased youth turnout by 30% from February to April. It's an organizing coalition, and by this I mean that our coordinated campaign recruited, hired, trained, and trusted organizers from the rank and file of social and labor movements, I see you, Crystal Gardner, who had politics from their fights for education justice, who had practiced talking about public safety from the referendum for treatment, not trauma, and you all should know Kennedy Bartley. She's going to be the next executive director of United Working Families. She led that referendum, who were in deep relationship with community leaders on the ground already, who were able to run an unmatched volunteer field program based on an issue platform built from years of organizing campaigns. It's an ideologically aligned coalition. Our politics, like the politics of our new mayor, were forged from years of collective struggle. I will never forget what it felt like to see Black parents dragged out of school board meetings in 2013, crying because Mayor Rahm Emanuel was going to close their schools. The ecosystem of organizations that made this moment possible didn't just pick winnable fights. We struggled for justice and for the public good at a time when austerity and privatization ruled the day. Erecting a political alternative means we use every tool in our tool set. Strikes and occupations, negotiating for legislative concessions when we can get them, introducing legislation that we know won't pass because we need an alternative, and elections. We won't always win in the short term because there has been a generational project by the capitalist class to shrink the terrain of the possible. But we are animated by the belief that we should win because we should strive to be the multiracial, working class majority that can win. We do not elect saviors. We use elections as structure tests to tell us how close we are to that majority political will. And this is the coalition that has the courage to make the impossible possible. The stakes never get lower. People left their jobs to work on this campaign. True believers, like women like Stacey Davis Gates of the Chicago Teachers Union, Erica Bland at SIU Healthcare, Diane Palmer at Local 73, Black women risked the power that they built over years of difficult organizing to do this. Candidates and elected officials campaigned on a coordinated slate, even though we are always told just to run your race. This movement is not possible without the courage, determination, and audacity of everyday people who dared to fight for more than the crumbs that we have been given. And this is a coalition, like Fred Hampton taught us, that dares to struggle, that dares to win, and that is going to transform Chicago, this nation, and this world. Thank you, Netroots.
Welcome to the stage, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten.
Now, this says, do not adjust the microphone. But if you notice, I am really short. So with the permission of Netroots, not that I ever asked permission, I'm adjusting the microphone. Is that better? It is great to be in Netroots in Chicago. And I just saw at this table the amazing president of the Chicago Teachers Union, Stacey Davis Gates. But what I want to say, and it's so great to see this many activists and allies in this ballroom. Chicago is a union town. Chicago is a fighting town. Chicago is a gritty town. And Chicago is a town that is going to show the world what the future should look like. And Chicago having all of us here today is because Chicago is a place, just like Netroots, that believes in freedom and justice and equality and a democracy. It believes in a future. You believe in a future of a climate that's sustainable. I say that as it's like 98 degrees in my city today. An economy that's fair. Us building a perfect union where everyone has a voice. Everyone has dignity. I can't believe you have to keep on saying that, but we have to do that right now because of what is around us, not just in this city, but in this country, in this nation. And frankly, as an educator and a unionist, I sit at the cross-section of the three enablers of opportunity, the three enablers of justice, the three enablers of freedom: education, the labor movement, and voting. So no wonder Mike Pompeo called me the most dangerous person in the world. But seriously, I want to talk for a minute about why teachers have become such targets. Remember at the beginning of the pandemic, parents showered praise on teachers and school staff. People saw just how crucial educators in public schools were in taking care of our kids and our communities. And then the far right started these smears, these malicious attacks and outright lies on public schools, on teachers. It's appalling. So why did they do this? Extremists try to divide Americans from one another. They know public schools are trying to unite us. They wage culture wars in schools, even though parents know that we have our kids' best interests at heart, not some other bizarro agenda that I don't even understand what they're talking about. What do? We present facts. We help young people learn how to think, to discern fact from fiction, to be curious, to lean into their potential and their passion. We try to address learning loss and the disconnection and alienation people still feel. And because of that, that's why 90% of parents send their kids to public schools, and that's why a large majority of parents want to see schools strengthened, not want to see these alternatives. But as the extremists continue to unleash this vitriol, you'll notice they don't offer one single idea as to how to strengthen public schools. Because they don't want to improve public schools. They want to end public schools. And they're not shy about telling us. Take Christopher Rufo, the culture warrior who invented the conflict over critical race theory. What did he say? And I'm going to quote him now correctly so he doesn't try to sue me for defamation again. To get to universal school choice, their name for vouchers, quote, you really need to operate from a premise of universal public school distrust. You have to be ruthless and brutal. Think about that. What he's saying about our children and about our schools. Distrust, ruthless, brutal. That's the playbook of fearmongers who call teachers groomers and say we teach filth. And of cultural warriors who censored honest history and banned acclaimed books like the poem Amanda Gorman did at Joe Biden's inauguration. So, what do we do about this? I can go on and on about the enablers of this, like the Supreme Court, and the person who is pretty much textbook for all of this, Governor Ron DeSantis. Wait, I didn't hear you. He believes his war on woke will propel him to the White House. But think about what they are blind to. Real people's problems. Florida has the highest inflation rate in the country, nearly double the national average, and a housing crisis to boot. Meanwhile, rate hikes, rubber stamped by the state, have nearly doubled average insurance costs, with homeowners now paying 3 times the national average. And when Farmers Insurance said they're going to leave, what did Governor DeSantis say? Oh, they're just woke. What he is not awake. So obviously, we have to fight all of this. But, and you can see the point I'm about to get to, which is, this is where we need all of you. The public's with us. We're winning poll after poll. Look at what Move On did today in terms of the banning books bus. This is the bottom line, though. If we don't act together as a community, if we don't act as a beloved community, going and doing and getting into good trouble, these extremists will win. And will we let them win? And the other thing we have to do, and that's what we're doing, is that we have to do what every school teacher knows, which is we have to meet people where they are. We have to listen to people. We have to hear people. And so that's why we, the Teachers Union, are going to do the following things. We're going to take on learning loss. We're going to take on this disaffection. We're going to do what we need to do to make public schools, every public school in the United States, a place that parents want to send their kids, a place that educators want to work, and a place that kids thrive. That's what we're going to do. But we need your help. We need your allyship. We need people to be involved and engaged in a movement, just like we're a movement for climate, just like we're a movement for freedom. We need to be a movement for all children. Are you ready to help us? Will you help us? Well, there's another person who's really, really there helping. And he's not just helping school teachers, he's helping all of Chicago. And that is Mayor Brandon Johnson. I often say our job is to be activists, aspiration agents, hope bringers. Our job is to help lift all, to make the middle class cool again, to ensure that everyone gets their God-given potential. But perhaps there's no better example of the personification of that than our next speaker, Chicago Mayor. I love saying that, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. When Paul Vallis spent $12.6 million during the mayoral runoff espousing a corporate plan to privatize this city's public schools, voters rejected it. But they didn't just reject it because it was a horrible, reprehensible idea. They rejected it because of who was running against Vallis. Because in Brandon, they saw a vote for the future, a vote for progress, a vote for real plans to lift up the city's schools, address public safety, and ensure every Chicagoan had a fair shot at a better life. Now, I know Brandon for a long time, but I watched him the last few days of the campaign, campaigning for him. I saw his love for this city and the city's love for him. a middle school history teacher, a CTU organizer, where colleagues and former students went door to door with him. And everyone who lives in Chicago now sees that brilliance, that love, that compassion. And I want to introduce you to Chicago's Mayor, Brandon Johnson.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Please. Thank you so much. You know, I've gotten used to the fact that you all give me nice, loud round of applauses, much like my middle school students did to me every single morning. So thank you for provoking that memory. And thank you, Randy Weingarten, for that amazing introduction. And oh my gosh, isn't it great to be in the greatest freaking city in the entire world, the city of Chicago? I have to tell you though, being here today, you know, reminds me of why we do this work. And quite frankly, this is home. To be in a room full of individuals who love people, who are willing to invest your time in organizing, to make sure that we do everything in our power to bring people up out of poverty and to ensure that those of us who are part of the working class have a real shot at the dream that our ancestors could only imagine. Now, I have to be honest with you all. I know some of you are not used to seeing me in a suit. Now, I've always been this cute though, make no mistake about it. Just didn't always have to dress up as much. Not used to having armed guards surround me and take me from place to place. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if I'll ever get used to that. Because one of the most important decisions I've ever made in my life was becoming a Chicago public school teacher, teaching 7th and 8th graders. And it taught me an awful lot about what's possible when we actually spend time helping young people see and know their value. But unfortunately, for too many families across this country, and especially in major cities and in rural communities, value and purpose is not always found and discovered. In fact, I can tell you firsthand, of having worked and served as a school teacher, that too many of our young people have been left in economic despair because of policies that have, unfortunately, favored the very few and the rich and the powerful. But aren't you glad that you are part of a movement that recognizes that working people, black, brown, white, this multicultural, intergenerational movement that has propelled a middle school teacher to the 5th floor, that we are not going to succumb to the interests of those who have had power for too long in this country. Now, I should just say, though, before I get too far off in my presentation, for those of you who are new to the city of Chicago or visiting, this is not Naperville. Now, clearly, those of you who are laughing are clearly admitting that you watch Fox and Friends, so that's a whole nother implication. But for those of you who are not familiar with that, the day that I was elected, Fox News said that when Brandon Johnson gets elected, the entire world is going to collapse. They said that the streets would be overtaken by violence. Many folks, even one particular politician said, do not accept the results. There are real forces that do not want to see the movement that we have built come to fruition. Now, make no mistake about it, it's not as if I did not know that there were forces that oppose our values, but to know that there are forces that are working hard every single day to share or to promote a narrative about the city of Chicago that is wrong. In fact, those forces want to define and characterize the city of Chicago as this violent, unstable city. The way they characterize this city, these forces that are working hard to disrupt our movement, they want you to believe that you cannot walk freely in this city and experience the wealth and the vitality and the vibrancy of the city of Chicago. Now, let me be very clear. We have our challenges in the city of Chicago, like many American cities do. But I'm also reminded of one of the most incredible leaders of our time, the great Karen Lewis. Who said that this fight for education was about a fight for the soul of public education. Because she knew, in the words of W.E.B. Du Bois, that public education at the expense of the state, after all, is and always will be a Negro idea. And that liberation through the lens of those who were descendants of slaves, there's no greater testament to what's possible when you have individuals who are part of a movement that believe that public accommodations have to be guaranteed rights. And whether it's education, transportation, housing, jobs, healthcare, that the soul of Chicago was on full display because it's here in this city where Chairman Fred recognized that every child should have something to eat before they go to school. That's the soul of Chicago. It's also the place where a reverend said, hope is alive, that ran on single payer, much like Chairman Fred said that health care is a human right. And in 1984 and 1988, Reverend Jesse Jackson changed the rules that led to President Barack Obama getting elected. Reverend Jesse Jackson is the soul of Chicago. The soul of Chicago sent a black Haitian man named Jean-Baptiste Point de Sabo to establish a new city at the mouth of the river. They understood that the soul of Chicago is through the lens of real, true liberation. I'm reminded of individuals like Marion Stamps, who is the mother and grandmother of a movement for housing justice. And the system that fought against her, her daughter is now the Cook County Commissioner, the seat that I ran and won on. That's the soul of Chicago. The soul of Chicago also reflects that the son of Rudy Lozano Sr., who helped build a black and brown coalition and was taken away from us, now his son sits at the very table that he fought and died, and people killed those leaders to prevent us from being at those tables. But now Rudy Lozano Jr. sits at the table of power when it comes to public education. That is the soul of Chicago. Now, I'll be remiss with me doing the city of Chicago a service if I didn't talk about the fact that we have the best cuisine in the entire world. And so whether you go to Pilsen, whether you go to the west or south sides of Chicago, whether you want tacos or catfish, whatever you want, I need you to spend as much money as possible these next few days because the soul of Chicago's got to be funded. Now, you will also see the vibrancy of our city through our arts and culture, our sports arenas, that it imbibes the true nature of what the soul of Chicago is all about. But we also have to recognize that in every major city, particularly after the pandemic, saw an increase, and during the pandemic, saw an increase in crime. Now, many people will make you believe that the only way in which you can have safe communities is by simply engaging in the politics of old, the failed strategies of believing that the only answer to public safety is policing. That's a failed strategy, that we spend more money on police per capita anywhere else in the world, and has it worked? It has not. And quite frankly, You know, the individuals on Fox and Friends, and I don't want y'all to misunderstand me. I don't just sit around and watch Fox and Friends all day. I just think that it's important that we note that the narrative that they want to push in the city of Chicago, if they're successful, that's the narrative that they want to push all over the country. And we're not going to stand for it in the city of Chicago, and we're not going to stand for it anywhere in this country. That in order to have a better, stronger, safer Chicago, we have to do what works, and that's invest in people. The real economic security, the public safety plan, has to be about investing in people. And that's why I'm grateful that the movement that led me to the 5th floor is a movement that is radical because it actually demonstrates the greatest radical act, and that's the act of love. And so our campaign was very clear. It's all about real, true public investments, that we have to move it past the stale and racist talking points of the past, and we have to decide to actually do what is best for the people of Chicago and for this country, and that's to invest in them. No one should be too poor to live in one of the richest cities, Chicago, in one of the richest countries, America, at the richest time in the history of the world. There is literally more than enough for everybody. Everybody. No one should lose at the expense of someone else winning. Now, the soul of Chicago is on full display tonight because you see it and you can feel it in the air, this multicultural, intergenerational movement that has propelled us into this moment where we don't have to shrink and we don't have to hide from our values. We can actually run on our principles and values and win. Now, as I close here, and I mean that in a real way because you all know that I'm a son of a pastor. He was a carpenter. Y'all know this, right? He was a carpenter and a pastor. Had a lot of pressure growing up in the house when your father is just like Jesus. That brother worked hard. Raised in a household with 9 siblings and also foster siblings in a house with 1 bathroom. I learned how to negotiate really early in life. Form allies with women. In order for us to transform our economy, we have to be bold and audacious. As President Biden has articulated, he said that a teacher and a firefighter should not pay the same tax rate as a billionaire and a millionaire. Now, you all should feel good about that because clearly President Biden read my budget plan. Because there are forces that see our values and our view of the world, and they'll tell us, that sounds good, but how are you going to pay for it? Well, if you still don't know, let me make sure you know. In order to make sure that education is a human right, healthcare, affordable housing, climate justice, transportation system, a green technology industry that actually provides real economic opportunities to deal with the climate change that we are experiencing, the wealthy in this country have to step up, put some skin in the game, and pay their fair share. And I'm grateful that we have industry in the city of Chicago, like our restaurant industry, one of the largest, if not the largest employers of young people in this city. And yet, because of the sub-minimum wage, many of our young people are working full-time and still find themselves living in poverty. We have too many people who are working hard every single day and cannot afford to live in the very city in which they work in. And this is not just a Chicago challenge. This is a challenge for the country. We get to be bold and audacious in this moment. if 100 years ago could lead to the plight that we are experiencing right now with the labor rights movement and the civil rights movement, as Dr. King said, if it were to ever collide, what enormous potential we would have. That potential is alive and well today. And so tonight I'm going to be working with our servers tonight. And I know that there's been a great deal of work to make sure that there's one fair wage for the people who do the work. And so, as I said before, I want you all to enjoy yourselves in the city of Chicago. And I want you to lean on one another. That the best thing that we can do collectively is to organize one neighborhood, one block at a time. And as we continue to build the organizing power that is in this room today, that we can set a new course for generations to come. That black, brown, white, young, old, rich. I got 2 rich friends now, poor, no matter who you are, you get to have a better, stronger, safer Chicago. We get to transform this country with the very people in this room. And for those who wish to divide us at this time, we're not going to allow them to do it. We're going to look each other in the eyes and we're going to live out the full manifestation of those who only can dream of this moment. We will not cower. We will not flinch in this moment, but we will swing back with the full authority of the ancestors that made this moment possible. God bless you all, Netroots. Let's build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. Let's build a better, stronger, safer America. Thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Hi, my name is Saru Jayaram, and I'm the co-founder and president of One Fair Wage. The mayor's about to, thankfully, we're so grateful to him, join us to don an apron along with lots of city council members. They call them alder people here. And be a server for an hour at the reception across in the ballroom. We have been fighting to end the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers for 150 years. It's a direct legacy of slavery. It started at emancipation, but now with the pandemic, thousands of workers are refusing to work for sub-minimum wages. Thousands of restaurants are raising wages to recruit staff. We just won in DC, we just won in Michigan, and we're about to win here in Chicago.